Hey guys, this is Dr. Hayes. I'm making a series of a few videos for the Picturebooks unit for this week. It's probably going to be 3 videos. The first 2 you'll watch for Tuesday's class, and the third one you'll watch for Thursday's class. That's kind of the plan for now. I just got a speaker for my laptop, and so that you can maybe hear me. You might be able to hear my kid yelling in the background as well. So I'm sorry about that. But this first video, I wanted to talk about the idea of picture books as a concept and give a little bit of theory behind that. And then the next 2 videos, I'm going to give a timeline of picture book titles from the beginning of when they started up through present day, and some of the main titles and award-winning picture books. So the concept of a picture book is relatively new. It's about 100 years old. So picture books started in the 1920s. Before that, we had illustrated books. So we've had books so far in our class that have had pictures in them, but it was illustrations that accompanied the text that went along with the the story. But it was illustrations that you could read the story without having the pictures there, and it would be perfectly fine. Picture books are different in that the pictures and the text work together as a whole unit, and so you cannot separate one from the other. They go together. So because of that, there are different theorists who like to combine the word picture book. I'm one of them. They spell it picture book, all one word. If you spell it like that in like Microsoft Word or something like that, it will give you the little red squiggly and tell you that that is incorrect, which I guess technically it is, but it is an intentional choice to spell it as one word to make it sort of obvious that it is undividable, like the pictures and the text have to go together. So we're talking about picture books as a concept. So they emerged in the 1920s as sort of an art form. They were very experimental. At the time, they were only possible because of emerging and advancing printing technologies and color technology and painting of the picture books and the way that they can be developed. And so some of the precursors to the picture books that we've read already, like the Beatrix Potter books, where you have text on one side, picture on the other side, and it's still an illustrated book, but we're starting to see where the illustrations are becoming more integral to the story, where it's harder for them to be separated out from the story. And so the Beatrix Potter books and some of those like that were leading up to the start of the picture book genre. Other things that people think about when they analyze picture books is the page turn. And so when I show some specific titles in the other videos, we'll talk about how the author uses the page turn, right? So depending on the placement of the images on the page, either if the characters are looking away to the next screen, the next page, it encourages you to turn the page. But if there's a character standing there looking back at you, it sort of makes you stop turning the page. So illustrators can use a page turn or a delayed page turn to actually add to the art form and the narrative and the way that it's read. Another thing we look at is the use of the space. So if there's a lot of white space on the page, if objects sort of hover in space without being grounded in an environment, there are different reasons why illustrators would choose to do that, and sort of the emotion it evokes in the reader. Sometimes characters on the page will turn and look at the reader and almost like catch the reader or the child staring and looking into this world. And sometimes the characters on the page, they pretend or act like they don't even notice that there's a reader there. And so that works for different effects depending on what the illustrator and the author want to do. Another area of criticism within picture books is the use of classic art techniques like line and shape and color, and how those the lines and the shapes and the colors work together to sort of add to character development and setting the scene and the narrative tone. And you know, it actually kind of helps you interpret some of the scenes of the book. And so what picture books do, there's a reason why those are our first books. Like, because before we learn how to read with words, we learn how to read pictures. We learn visual literacy, where we learn how to interpret color placement and line shape and line weight and shape placement. We learn how to read those visual cues before we learn how to read text. And so picture books are some of the earliest books we know how to read, because we become visually literate before we become textually literate. Then it just seems to be the case that once we become texturally literate, we sort of move on past picture books because they're childish or for babies. And so we sort of get rusty in our visual literacy. We sort of lose that a little bit. And so there's sort of been a movement more recently to reinstate picture books as more of a mature medium, something that adults can enjoy. We had the same conversation when we were talking about fairy tales, how older readers are sort of reclaiming the picture book genre as worthwhile for a mature reader to be able to interact with and sort of reteach ourselves that visual literacy that we lose whenever we switch over to a straight sort of textual literacy. We get real self-conscious about reading books with pictures because those are for kids and for babies. But hopefully you'll see some of the titles I show in the next few videos. You'll see how the picture book genre is very artistic, and it's full of very complex art that could hang in a museum, some of these picture books. So that brings me to the last thing I'll say in this video is the major award for picture books is the Caldecott Medal, at least in America. In Britain, they have the Greenaway Medal, which is named after Kate Greenaway, which is an accomplished illustrator they have over there. We talked about her when we looked at alphabet books. Here we have the Caldecott Medal, which is named after an illustrator from America. And the Caldecott Medal, you might see it on the front. I'll show you in a minute. You'll see it on the front of books. It's like a big, like silver sticker on the front of a picture book. And that's, the Caldecott Medal is awarded specifically for achievement in illustration. And so that's how we recognize picture books. Some picture book authors are also their own illustrator, so the author and the illustrator are the same. Like Maurice Sendak, for example, Dr. Seuss, they write and illustrate their books, and Chris Van Allsburg is another one. So some picture book authors are one and the same author and illustrator, but more often is the case that the author who writes the text is separate than the illustrator who does the illustrations, the pictures. And sometimes the author and the illustrator are able to work together to create the book, but sometimes the text is written and then the author doesn't see it again, and the illustrator takes it and then must interpret it visually, and the author doesn't know what it's going to look like until it gets to the finished product. And that is, I would think, a nerve-wracking experience for an author of a story, to not know how their story is going to be illustrated. But it does happen. So we'll talk about all the different kind of ways that takes place. But for now, I think I'm going to end this video. This is the introduction video, and then the 2 videos after this will be Picture Book Timeline Part 1 and a Picture Book Timeline Part 2. Part 1 is for Tuesday, Part 2 is for Thursday. Okay, I'll see you on the next video.